Hey everybody, welcome back for another video. My name is Tanya, for those of you that are new here, and I'm a watercolor artist. So the Roses Sharon are blooming beautifully in my garden, and I was inspired to paint one for you. So I hope you enjoy the video. Okay, so to get started, I've got my Arches watercolor paper. I've got my Grumbacher paintbrushes. I have different sizes here. I'll let you know what size I'm using as I'm going along. I've got my pencil, my water, my paper towel, and I've got some of my Winsor Newton watercolors here. All right, so the Roses Sharon has 5 big petals. So, and they're very wavy. They're not like perfectly little round. They're more like flappy little petals. So start with the middle here. If you want to Google some images of Rose of Sharon, just to kind of see how their petals are. So, and there's 5 of them. And then some of them overlap. Just depends on how it's positioned. And then it has the centerpiece that kind of comes down. So just your little round center here, just kind of bring it down like that. All right, so that's about all we're going to be drawing at this point. If you want to go ahead and lighten up some of your lines, your pencil marks, you can. I'm just going to lighten them up just a little bit around the edges here, but not too much because I want you to still be able to see them. So I'm going to take my size 7 paintbrush, and I'm going to take a little of my Payne's Gray. Let's show you what I'm doing here. So I'm going to wet my Payne's Gray, and I'm going to make kind of a wash here. I don't want it to be too dark because your flower is white. Well, depending on which Rose of Sharon you're looking at, there's white ones, there's purpley violet ones, and I'm looking at a white one. So I'm just going to take a little bit of Payne's Gray, and you want these petals to have the look of a white flower, but you also want to give it some dimension. So you can use a Payne's Gray, you can use a black, any neutral tone that you want to use. I'm going to go over, and the middle of the flower is a little bit darker, and mine's got like a reddish pink in the middle. So I'm just going to go over it with some Payne's Gray. I'm going to leave a lot of white still showing. And then it's also got all these little veinings coming through. So just barely touch your paper and start making some little veinings, some little veins coming through like this. And then also look at the image that you're looking at, and wherever the shadows are, try to mimic those shadows as well. So I'm just looking at a photograph here that I took of the Rose of Sharon that was in my garden. But you can look at any image you want. So see how you're still leaving it kind of like a white flower, white petals here, but you're just giving it some definition. So it's a really, really light wash of Payne's Gray, or whatever color you choose. And if you feel that you can't make your veining really tiny, you can always go to a smaller paintbrush. Now, where some of these petals are overlapping, you want one to be dark, the one on the bottom to be a little bit darker, and the one on top to be a little bit brighter. So that's just kind of a little rule of thumb, that whatever's pushed back could be a little bit darker. All right, so that's about all we're going to do with the Payne's Gray at this point. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start making some of the reddish pinky color. And let's see, I've got alizarin crimson and I've got a permanent rose. So let's do the alizarin crimson first. Just going to make a wash here of it. Not using that much because we're going to keep layering this. So the middle of the flower that I'm looking at, is darker in the middle, and it starts bleeding off a little bit as it goes out towards the end of the petals. You could have dried your you could have dried your Payne's Gray first. I chose not to because I just wanted to kind of bleed with some of those little veins that we had just done. But you could definitely go ahead and you could definitely go ahead and dry your painting first. And here again, if you want to go to a smaller size paintbrush, definitely do that. I'm still using my size 7. I'm going to deepen up my tones here. I'm still using the same color, I'm just not watering it down. I'm going to let it bleed out to what I just did. Maybe I'll deepen it up a little bit more. So I'm just going straight from my paint to my paper because my paper is wet. So there's no need to put any more water on my paintbrush. All right, I'm gonna let that do its thing. All right, I'm gonna start on the background and I'm gonna use my 1/2 inch brush here, my flat brush. I'm gonna take, let's see, I've got a couple different greens on my palette here. I've got a sap green and I've got a Winsor green blue. So I'm just gonna get them nice and wet. Make a little wash here on my palette. And I'll take a little bit of the other green also. Make a little wash of that. Okay, and then you're gonna wanna just carefully go around your flower. Now at this point, your Payne's Gray, all these veinings should be dry. If they're not, then go ahead and dry them because you don't want to get the green inside your flower. And you can alternate which colors you're using. If you want to add a little blue in here, I'm just choosing green just because it's going to kind of mimic that it's got, you know, some leaves on in the background. But if you wanted to do a blue sky, whatever color you want, purple would be pretty, any color you want. Just be careful to go around your petals. So see how that's making the flower look whiter already? Because it's the contrast of the background and the flower. You could even add a little Payne's Gray in here if you want to. Just drop in a little bit. Let that do its thing. Mix it up a little bit. Blend it in. So it looks like there's some shadows. Now, the flowers that I'm looking at, the Rose of Sharon that I'm looking at, the petals are very jaggedy almost, so it doesn't have to be a nice smooth curve. Kind of do like a shaky line. And then you can also just take some water and blend it out a little bit. So if you want to just kind of make it look like your edges are blurred, just take some water and just pounce it on and it'll automatically just blur your edges. Look how pretty that is. So I've got some Payne's Gray, some of the darker green, and some more of the sap green down this way. I'm gonna let that dry a little bit and then I might give it another little layer. So I see that my red is still a little damp. I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna deepen up my color a little bit more. I'm still using my alizarin crimson. And I'm just deepening up the middle of that flower. Just going straight from my paint to my paper. I'm not adding any water because there's already water on my page. So there's no need to add more water. Look how pretty that is. If you want to help it along a little bit with a light hand, Just bring up some of that veining. And you can bring up as much veining as you want. Now the flowers that I'm looking at, the red only stays more towards the middle here. You don't really want to bring it all the way out because again, it is a white flower with a red center. But you can always just help it come out a little bit. And I think I'm going to take a little bit of my Payne's Gray and I just want to deepen up that middle. I just want to push that middle back a little bit more. So I'm taking a little Payne's Gray and I'm just dabbing in a little bit here and there. Right in the center of the flower. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and let that dry and then we're gonna give it another layer. Okay, so I went ahead and I dried my flower and we're gonna go ahead and deepen up the tones a little bit. I'm gonna start with the green and let's see, I think I'll just use my size 7 for this. I'll take some of my sap green, make another little wash here, and just go ahead and just deepen up some of my colors that are around my flower. The more you deepen it up, the more your flower is just gonna pop right off that page. So don't be afraid of deepening up your colors. And I'm just gonna alternate which greens I'm using here. And then a little of the Payne's Gray also. Before that dries, if you want to go ahead and just kind of add a little water to blur it out. Yeah, that's really pretty. All right, so we're gonna let that dry and I'm gonna move over to my size 5, maybe? Should I use 5 or 0? You know what, let's go ahead and use 0. I'm gonna go ahead and use the 0 first. And I'm just gonna keep deepening up with the same colors that I've been using all along. I just wanna punch that red just a little bit more. And now my veins are a little bit more delicate because I'm using the size 0. Now I'm leaving the outer part of the pinky red color that we did. I'm leaving that lighter. I'm just doing more of the middle. And I'm gonna bring in some of that Payne's Gray too. Look at that. Don't be afraid to add your darks. And let it bleed out. That's really gonna push that center in. And you can help it along with some veining if you want. Now this is just gonna be shadows. Of course, the flower is not black in the middle. This is just gonna be more of a shadowed part of your flower. So you don't wanna go over all of the red because the flower is definitely reddish pink in the middle. You just want that to look like it's shadowed. All right, I am gonna go ahead and I'm gonna crispen up some of my lines a little bit here. And I'm gonna take my Payne's Gray and I'm just gonna add a little bit here and there. It's almost like you're tracing the flower, but not really, because then you're going in with water and you're smoothing it out. Or like this part of my page was still wet, so it's just bleeding on its own. But if it's not bleeding on its own, you can help it along a little bit. I just want to pop that flower from my page a little bit more. And you can come into your flower a little bit if you want to, because then that helps it not look like an outline. So if you come into your flower a little bit, it just kind of gently eases it into your flower and then back out into the background. So it doesn't look like an outline. I'm gonna blur it out again. And I think I wanna do up here too. Now see how I did some darker areas and some I did not do? I do want to leave still some lighter areas. So it's kind of like a push and pull of your flower on the petal versus the background. So you want to go ahead and darken up some of your edges, but not all of them, because then it will start looking like a flat painting, almost like you just made an outline. And you don't want that. You want to give this a little bit more of a realistic look. All right. I am going to go ahead and I'm going to start doing the center of the flower here. So I have my yellow ochre. Just get that wet a little bit. Make a little puddle on my palette here. Nice little wash. And so some of that little area here is white and some of it is more of a yellow golden color. So I'm gonna go in and I'm just gonna be pouncing because I still wanna see some of the white of my page coming through. Okay, so see how I just pounced that on? You still see the white of the page coming through. If you wanna deepen that up a little bit, especially towards the center, I've got my burnt umber. You can add a little burnt umber in there, especially towards the center, like that. If you want to go ahead and deepen up some of your edges here of your petals, you definitely can. I'm going to take a little bit of my Payne's Gray, and I'm just going to come in a little bit. So as your painting starts to dry, you'll see where you just need a little bit more of your colors. If something's not popping off the page enough, you know that you need just a little bit more of a darker tone. And I'm just going over some of the areas that I already had darkened up before. I'm just popping them a little bit more. All right, I think it's starting to look really, really nice. I'm gonna add a little bit more. I wanna just push the center of this flower in a little bit more. So I'm gonna add a little bit more Payne's Gray right in this area. You're probably thinking I'm crazy, but I really want to push that flower down a little bit, that center. And see how I left some negative space there? Look how pretty that is. So it still gives some definition to each petal. If you did not leave white space there, you can always use the P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White. I do use this once in a while at the end of my paintings just to bring a little bit more white back to the surface if I didn't leave enough of the paper showing through. So you can always use this too. And actually we are going to be bringing in a little bit of that in the center here. Okay, I think it's looking really, really nice, but I want to push it a little bit more. And if you've watched my videos, you know that sometimes I just don't know when to stop. So I'm just going to deepen up some of my, actually I'm going to move to my size 5. And I just want to push some of these petals back a little bit. I'm just taking some Payne's Gray. I put some Payne's Gray on, then I'm blending it in a little bit. I don't want to do too much because I want to leave some of my my veins still showing through that we had done at the beginning. So I'm just going over and I'm just deepening up certain parts of my flower that I think need to be shadowed a little bit more. But not too much because these are white petals. And if you want to skip this part, you could definitely skip this part. If you're a little too nervous to do this part, that's okay. But I'm just going in and I'm just deepening up a little bit more. There. And I think I'm going to deepen up here too. And it just kind of makes your flower, your petal look a little bit more curved. That's all. But if you're too afraid to do that part, then definitely don't do it. And if you think you did a little too much, just take a little paper towel. I just ripped off a little piece of my paper towel here. And if your paper is still wet, you can go over it a little bit. Just dab it off, lighten it up a little bit. Like that. All right, so we are going to be bringing in a little bit of our bleed-proof white, and if you don't want to use a good brush for this, which I don't, so I always pull in just a generic paintbrush for this part. Stir it up real good if you think it needs to be stirred. I just used this a little while ago, so I don't think mine needs to be stirred. And I'm going to go over with just little dots, just on that middle part here, just to pop it a little bit more. Now, if you felt that you need a little bit more pop on some of these areas here, like the little veining, you could definitely add a little bit here. I pretty much left my white, so I don't need to do this part, but I'm just going to show you. So I'm going to go over. And let's say I just wanted to make that petal pop a little bit more. You could always tone this down, or I shouldn't say tone this down. You could always water this down, just to give it a little bit more of, just to thin it out a little bit so that it just is a little bit more creamier on your page. It just kind of lays down a little bit easier. And I'll show you, maybe I wanted this part to be a little bit crisper up here. So I could just add a little bit more up here, taking a little bit of my white, my bleed-proof white, and I'm taking a little bit of water on my brush, and I'm just crispening up some of my edges. See that? See how that crispened it up really nice? Let's do this one. So my page is white. I did leave white there, but I want it to pop a little bit more. So I'm just gonna take some water and blend that out. And again, give it all those like little ruffle marks, because these petals are definitely not smooth. See how that just kind of crispens up your edge? This versus this. Let's do this one. Add a little water, blend it out. Now you don't want to blend it all the way up your petal because you want to leave all that beautiful veining you did at the beginning. So pretty. Wow, that just popped off the page. Now, if you think you have a little bit too much red in some areas, you can always go in and add a little bit more white if you want to, just to make even like the center part pop. Let's see. I'll do this. Even though it doesn't need it, I'm gonna do it just to show you. So if you wanna do just some little veinings like that, just to loosen up some of that red that you did. Let's say you think you have a little bit too much red, just loosen it up a little bit with just a little bit of white. And you can go over this with, you know, a gouache. If you have a gouache white, if you have just a regular white watercolor, you could do that as well. It will work. Everything will work. But I just happen to have this bleed-proof white sitting in front of me, so that's what I used. So if you've watched my videos before, you know I can go on and just keep, you know, popping this off my page even more, making it look a little bit more realistic with some details. But I think I'm going to leave it at this for the video. But if you want to continue on and keep working on your flower, definitely go for it. But I'm going to stop right there. So I did forget to tell you one thing. I know a lot of you have mentioned that you don't have the Arches watercolor paper. So I did do this flower on regular, just generic watercolor paper. And I wanted to show you how beautiful it turned out. So it doesn't really matter what paper. If you don't have the Arches, I love Arches watercolor paper. It's my favorite paper. If you don't have it, I know it's a little pricey. You could just use any watercolor paper. Look how pretty that turned out. So I just wanted to show you that there's not that much of a difference here. I hope you enjoyed the video and learned a little something. And if you did like it, please give me a thumbs up, and you can make a comment in the comment section. And you can also follow me on Facebook and Instagram. And don't forget to subscribe if you want more videos like this one. Have a great day. Bye.